with how often y'all were on the road during non-conference, I know you're a very regimented, like, scheduled person, but how much do you feel like all of those road games prepared y'all as you had on your first SEC trip?
Yeah, I think for sure it helps. And a lot of our more experienced guys are somewhat accustomed to my idiosyncrasies, and so they don't rebel against them. They're aware of them. What we're doing today is what we would do one day before any other road game, and so we've had several reps of that, even though it wasn't always to necessarily true road games like this will be. But I do think that it's good prep. It doesn't necessarily change the result, but some of the things leading up to the game, we've had multiple reps of going into the first week of conference play.
I know y'all's formula is based on the numbers that you see from other teams and kind of the personnel that y'all have, but is there something in you that is proud of kind of the gritty way that y'all play the game, and it might not be the most aesthetically pleasing, but it gets the job done well?
It's the only chance we have. And similar to, it may have been you, I can't remember, on Saturday, I think it's the awareness of our group that that's the recipe that we have to follow. But I also think that it's their acceptance of that recipe. That's what I would say is different. I don't think that the guys that have been here multiple years are caught off guard by what we practice or what we emphasize or what we say. But I think their acceptance of it is at the highest level that it's been since they've been here. And I think some of the continuity of that acceptance you can see. Because it's not just Buzz accepting it or Travis accepting it or Olin accepting it. It's accepting it collectively, but then also individually. And I think all of us are aware of that, and that includes me. That's not just the players. I think there's great acceptance and awareness within the entire organization. Landry, Grant, Josh, I think the players are aware of that as well. And so we don't have a lot of inefficiencies relative to time because everybody kind of knows what the buckets of responsibilities are. And we don't have the best players. We don't have the best coaches. But I think collectively that we're aware of our limitations and accept those limitations and know that we're probably going to have to try to bend the game or the possession in a way that at least gives us a 50-50 chance. I think that says a lot about their IQ, but I think it also says a lot about their character and consistency and willing to do it day after day.
How much progress and comfort do you see with Zurich now and the way he plays now as within the framework of what you're trying to do as opposed to maybe a month ago?
Well, I think, before you had to have injury reports, obviously you guys know he was out there for the first game, but he had missed. I'm not saying the practices we have in January aren't as important as the practices we have in October, but for someone that's new and someone that was and is going to have the role that he has, he missed a lot of practices, kind of the installation of what we do on both sides of the ball. He's really smart, and he's been around the game his whole life. So he was on the side watching and aware of what was happening, but he didn't get those reps. Personally, I know he played well on Saturday, and that was very important to our success. I think he can play closer to how he played on Saturday more often. Statistically speaking, he's played with an incredibly high turnover rate prior to Saturday, and still, I think, had more turnovers than he wants. He gets fouled at a high rate, but he hasn't shot it as well as I think that he can. And I think he's continuing to improve. He's never been an offensive rebounder in his career, and within the importance of that to our recipe, he's been very up and down. But if you were to study the last 5 games in regards to how we grade offensive rebounding, he's been much more consistent. So he's taking good steps that are really important to us. When he's going downhill, and he makes real-time decisions at the pace that he plays, and those decisions are right, it doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to score. But if he makes the right decision, it makes the game easier for the rest of us.
I know the Texas game gets a lot of notoriety for what it is, but from where you went to school, and is Oklahoma a nostalgic opponent?
Yeah, from where I'm from, that would be just as big a deal, and maybe just as people are more talking about that Boomer Sooner as much as they're talking about the University of Texas. But similar to what I said to Brent last week, it's all might as well be Mars. But yeah, I mean, Coach Tubbs was the head coach there when I was in college, and obviously Coach Sampson was the head coach there early in my career. Coach Kruger's done an unbelievable job. I think even Coach Mosier, every single one of those guys I just mentioned has been to at least one Final Four and has had success everywhere that they've coached. And Coach is going to do the exact same thing those other guys have done. But I remember while being a manager in college, going to watch practice at the University of Oklahoma. Obviously, when I was at OCU as a manager, I was there at least once a week, and always tried to get Coach Tubbs to hire me in some capacity. And then obviously ended up hiring Rock years later. So it's ironic how things have always moved.
A couple questions about Hayden, just kind of his journey over the last year. But, you know, at the end of last season, when he may have had a decision to make on what to do with his final year of eligibility, just what was the conversation like, and why you think he chose to return here instead of possibly pursuing another option?
I probably handled H's portion of that process different than I did anybody else in the program. The returners, the kids that we signed from the portal, Henry had the same decision. I asked Miss Hefner to leave H alone and let H make the decision, and I was very transparent with H in that same process. H has an inordinate amount of respect for authority. His high school coach, his mom, his dad, me, that's just how he was raised. And I didn't want to influence his decision. And so the typical end of the year meeting that I have, and I'm terrible at those because I only do it once a year, because I try to meet with them every day. And so anytime it's formal, I'm not very good. And to be honest, our staff and our players are not very good because we don't ever do it. But because of how things have changed, you have to do it because you got to figure out who's on your team. So when I met with him initially, I said, hey, here's how we're going to do this. I'm not going to give my opinion, and you're not going to make a decision for the next 30 days. And he said, so what are we going to talk about? And I go, we'll talk about anything you want to talk about, but I'm not giving my opinion at any point in this process, and you're not going to make the decision for 30 days. And so in the 30 days that I'm recruiting, you don't impact the decisions that I'm going to have to make over here, because I want you to make the decision. Not your parents, not me, not Texas A&M, not Texas A&M men's basketball, not the relationship with your players. Don't come to spring workouts. Stay out of the gym. And that's kind of how it started, because I thought that he had already done probably what he set out to do. And I didn't want him to feel pressure, specifically from me, to try to please me. And I pretty much told his mom that when he had his ring ceremony. Please just leave him alone. He'll make the right decision for him. And this is the last class, the only class that's ever had to make these decisions. And it's because of a worldwide pandemic that we pray never happens again. And it's because of how the rules have changed. And back then I would have said maybe that would never happen again, but it sounds like it may happen again without a pandemic. So I wanted H to make the decision.
And then just, he's found his way into the starting lineup and able to stay there and contribute in his own way. I feel like toward the beginning of the season, we talked a lot about how Henry and, you mentioned how he had some self-awareness to fit into his role and succeed into that.
Yep.
Do you see any similarity with what
Sure.
he's been able to do?
I think those guys, I probably should have hired them as GAs because they do a really good job coaching their position and being aware of what we're doing. And they're the first to catch me in a mistake as a coach. Like, they are fast twitch brain guys and completely bought into what we're doing. So I think Solo at the 3 provides a lot of really positive things on what I think our recipe is probably built to do best. Jace is probably in between Solo and H on what he provides. And H would get the last vote from me on that. But because he does it every single time on both sides of the ball, obviously when Jace got his face hurt and missed Ohio State, that kind of triggered it. Solo got hurt against Oregon. I guess that was the week after, right? Solo doesn't play the last 36 minutes against Oregon. And so some of it just happened organically. But what I would say is it's probably helped our forward roster change and movement be a little more fluid in a good way. And I also think it's opened up some minutes at times where CJ gets extended minutes for catch shoot opportunities. So in some ways, the decision for H to be the starter, even though it hasn't really changed his minutes, it's kind of allowed us to manipulate how we're dispersing the other 180 minutes.
What have you seen from Oklahoma so far? Just allow them to get out to 13-1.
Well, they've played they've played 7 high major games and they're 6-1. Obviously, their only loss was Saturday at Alabama, and I'm not sure when or if somebody will win in Tuscaloosa. They're as good as any team in the country. I love their team. I have known Coach forever. I've known Coach since he was an assistant coach here. He's a Final Four coach. He's phenomenal on both sides of the ball. Was one of the younger head coaches in the country. He's had success everywhere he's been. And then, in my opinion, worked for a top 5 basketball coach ever in Coach Majerus. And so his knowledge meter is very wide and very deep. So I love their team. I've enjoyed studying them. They probably play a little different than I anticipated going into my study. A lot faster than I thought they would be. Really efficient with the ball behind the arc. They get fouled at a very high rate. And similar to Texas, they're really good in the first 6 seconds, but maybe even as potent in the next 6 seconds of the possession. So they keep you on your heels at all times because they have 4 guys on the floor that can pass, dribble, and shoot, and that can make plays with or without a ball screen.
Stat sheet maybe didn't show it Saturday, but Pharrell just continues to seem to be able to impact the game. How have you seen him kind of fill that role and just add to your depth?
Yeah, we need him to continue to help us on the glass. He helps us at the rim, whether the opposing team has the ball or he has the ball. His impact at the rim is distinct, and we haven't had that in a long time since Jew left. We've been waiting for someone we can throw the ball to. We just need him to help us on the glass per minute. Relative to his size, he has to rebound better as the next 17 games unfold. And we don't count, if I miss it and rebound my own, we don't count that as an offensive rebound. And so I think he's made good traction over the last couple of weeks using his physicality when he doesn't have the ball to help us on the glass. And if he can do that, that changes the complexion of our team, because I think Solo does some things really, really well, and they're a little different than Andy. And I think he does some things really well. Henry does some things really well, and they're different than the first 2. And I think Gochi has that almost 4 different forwards that have a different talent and skill. And when they're all at their best in that skill, it helps our team for sure.
You feel, for lack of a better word, excited to be in the top 10 where A&M hasn't been in a while? Or do you prefer still being a little bit further, a little bit lower on the radar?
Yeah, I'm just so far removed from that. I know that's not I don't mean that condescending. I think the margins in this league are just so thin. And I think when you look at our schedule and you play Saturday, Wednesday, Saturday, and then it teeters back to Tuesday, Saturday, and then it flips back to Wednesday, Saturday, our organization is working 15 and a half, 17 hours a day, 9 days in a row before an off day. And that off day is only for the players. It's not for us. And so from a calendar standpoint of what's required just to have a chance, it's hard to maybe exhale and have a bowl of ice cream and be excited about that because you're going to play a top 20 team on the road, and the reward is you play a top 5 team at home. And so nothing against the voters. I don't know who they are, but there's some other metrics that probably matter more. But from a symbolism standpoint, without arrogance, I think it's pretty remarkable just to be transparent, to be at Texas A&M and to be ranked in the top 10 in what has become statistically the best league ever thus far. So we're thankful. So I don't want to make light of it in that regard.